Running Sentences presents The Lost Adventures of a Maybe Hero, Part 4, Scout. A few days have gone by, and Leonardo finds himself dragged out of the house to do some reconnaissance while still worrying about what Jeeves has told him. This is a work of fiction. Any names, characters, businesses, events, and instances within this story are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real people, real incidences, real stories, or businesses, events, and situations is purely coincidental, along with any fictional stories, incidences, characters, events, and so on are also coincidental. Copyright 2022, Michael Honoré. All rights reserved. Sleepily, Leonardo wandered into the garage, having spent the last few days fretting over what Jeeves had told him. He dare not ask what his butler meant or why he'd gone to visit his parents, for fear of being that the whole thing he was being told on. Instead, he told himself that he'd just done it and, well, he wasn't going to worry about it. Still, the apprehension about doing things for himself against his parents' wishes put a bit of a pit in his stomach and his heart, both of which decided they felt like they wanted to run away. He spotted Catalina resting against one of the cars, arms crossed, and looking over at him as he came in, so he put his thoughts aside and hoped his fears would go away. Your dad said you wanted to see me this morning. We have an operation to run, but we need to get a feel for the place first. We're going to the bank? Yes, as a couple, fake of course. To get upstairs to this place, we need to present ourselves like a couple that has some money to splurge, and, well, money makes everything go round. She pushed herself off of the car as he approached with a raised eyebrow. That seems rather predictable, doesn't it? I mean, it feels like all of the workings of a comic book that wanted to move its story along at a quick pace with a convenient solution. What do you suggest, then? And don't say business partners. I don't know enough about business to pull that off. Friends, then? Who happen to run into some money from another friend who tragically passed away and was like, here, have some money. No way. That would raise questions about whether or not we were sure about this. They would ask if we wanted to put the money in separate accounts and all that nonsense, just to keep it safe from one another. Decisions about important things that I don't know much about. Isn't that perfect, though? It's why we go to the bank in the first place. We get advice, and we figure out what's the best way to deal with our money, our new money. Oh yeah, that could work. But only as long as we aren't too distracted, and we do make sure we get a good look at the place. He nodded to this, and they both moved to get into the car. An uneventful drive from the house to the bank garage, and then into the bank later, Leonardo and Catalina strolled into the lobby of this bank, with both taking in the sights of the unimpressive stone and wooden surroundings. It was nice in a classical sense of a very upright and clean bank that kept everything in tip-top shape. But it also made it look rather old-looking one, and slightly drab, boring. They found themselves walking down a carpet lined by rope barriers that sent them towards a welcome desk where a line of a few people already stood. They waited their turn, which took a few minutes before getting to the front of this line. The person manning the welcome desk looked down at them from their seat above them as their glasses slipped down from their nose. Can I help you? Yes, we are looking to talk to a financial advisor. Do you have an account with us? No, but we are willing to opening one with, lots of money. Catalina elbowed him slightly, and he shot a look over at her. What was the problem with his comment? Banks love having money, and then using that money to lend it out to others at terrible rates. Someone saying lots of money was a good thing, wasn't it? How much money? That's to be discussed in a private setting, don't you think, worker, person? Fine. Take the right path off of this rug to the next desk. They will deal with you. Catalina and Leonardo both glanced at one another and did as they were told. Both kept looking around at the large lobby and all of its echoey steps, should anyone step off of the carpet. They, on the other hand, stayed on where they were supposed to on the carpet and kept looking around to see all that there was to see. Gothic-like stone, and then the wooden tellers area, where the tellers were separated from those waiting to do business. Leonardo took a hard look around, but could not spot a vault. So it was a classical bank. Shouldn't it have one placed there just to distract people? They had joined this second line and shuffled their way forward when the line moved. This one was going slower than the previous one, and Catalina had grabbed a hold of his arm. He looked over at her, and her sudden grasp of his arm. Is there something wrong? Crowds. What? Crowds. You don't like them? She shook her head yes, and they were very crowded in this thin line headed up to this desk. People seemed to have joined it and then crowded in to try and get to the front quicker, and, well, it just made everyone packed in. Though it was not worth the effort to do so. 30 minutes passed before they came before the new worker, and Catalina finally managing to relax her grasp, if only a little bit. Welcome to the bank investment side of the bank. How might we be of service to you today? We'd like to talk to a financial advisor, if we could. Ah, a noble thing for one to do. Let me see. What are your names, please? And do you have an account with us? My name is Andrea, right, and this is my friend, Jacob Boxer, and no, we do not have an account. The worker looked over them carefully and nodded. I see. Well, you'll need to talk to one of our introductory people then. How much money are we looking at that needs an advisor? The more money you say, by the way, the higher up your services will be, and probably more expensive as well. Catalina and Leonardo looked to one another, each searching for a suitable answer from one another's eyes before saying a number. They found no answer in those eyes, and they looked back at the worker, who raised both eyebrows expectantly. At least as high as 100,000 or so. The worker nodded and signed a slip, and then pointed off to the left, where the carpet branched off towards. There was also another branch off to the right, and this lobby seemed to be branching, carpets going every which way. Follow this left path to the elevators, and then go up to the second floor, please. Ask for Henry Douglas when you get to the receptionist. They were handed this slip of paper, and then herded off to the side. The second they got to the bank of elevators, they touched the call button, and in an instant one beeped and threw open its doors with an elevator doorman inside. The man was gracious and quick, and then got them to the second floor lickety-split. The doors opened to this lobby that, unlike the first floor, had no stone. Here it was all plastered with dark wood. The two stepped out, and once again onto a carpet that directed them to another desk with another worker. This one merely took their slip of paper upon getting up to this desk, and then hit a few buttons at that desk. A minute later, a man appeared from behind the desk, looking smart, slick, and a bit too smooth. I'm Henry Douglas, and I'm here to help you with your money, Mr. and Mrs. I'm Andrea Wright, and I'm Jacob. Jacob, how could you forget your own last name? It's literally yours. I never have a reason to use it, Miss Wright. The two shared a look with Leonardo, a little bit embarrassed, and Catalina seemed to rather enjoy this little bit, however. Anyway, he's Jacob Boxer. We're looking to see if your bank has all the right stuff for our investments. Oh ho ho, we have the right stuff. This here is the premier of premier banks. We handle money so carefully can't even squeak at night while it's sitting in our vault without raising suspicion from the guards. Brilliant. Well, Why don't we get a tour of this brilliant place then? So that we can make sure that this money doesn't, make any squeaks and it's held very carefully. Yes, we can do that after we talk in my little office about all this money that you're planning and your plans for it. We need to make sure that it's nice and safe in our hands. Henry Douglas signaled with a sweep of his arms that they should follow him towards his desk. Leonardo let Catalina go first, and then decided to take up the rearguard action, taking in the sights as they went. Wood was the main thing that came to his mind as they went past the greeting desk, and then another service desk. Deep into a cubicle hell of wood and key typing. They walked for a little while down a few rows and columns before they came to a stop at what looked like every other cubicle in the area. It was a wooden one that had a small desk and several chairs stuffed inside of it. Welcome to my abode for work. It's not pretty, but it sure is pretty. They did their best to stuff themselves inside this space, but with no room and tiny chairs, Leonardo and Catalina found themselves remarkably close to one another. Henry, the financial advisor, on the other hand, looked rather comfy on his side with space. So, what's this about money I hear? The two of us, though we aren't together in that way, we're looking to make a joint investment. The advisor looked them over, then ran his hands through his slicked, greased hair. All style and substance with this one. Leonardo did not like the look of him one bit. You could have fooled me that you two aren't together. Look at how close you are to one another. Sir, that is not exactly by choice. I think it is, and I advise against any co-accounts unless you two are getting married soon. Things tend to go badly quickly when money becomes involved. Hell, even when people are married, money makes things complicated. Could you just run down what your bank offers before we get into the gritty details of what you would not do? We already know that people will think this is a bad idea. There was another not-so-friendly look over at them from this other side of the desk, and then a sigh as the man sat forward. Fine. We here at the bank will take your money into our grasp and divide it between a variety of options. We invest some of it in low-yield stuff, then some of it into medium-yield stuff, and then a variety of options which will make some money. How much money? Enough to show results, though the more you give us, the more we make sure that your money stays at exactly that line of just enough. And what happens should your investments not pay off and our money drops below that line? Well, that will result in fines, fees, and other things that will be charged to your account for going below the acceptable number. Wouldn't that result in our account going even lower under this safe number? Leonardo was sitting on the edge of his seat trying to take all of this in. It sounded like this bank just wanted to use the patrons to make money. It is bank policy to not discuss potential situations with people who do not have current accounts with us. It is also not talked about unless you have a written court order and or sign a bajillion or so waivers saying that you can't tell anyone anything we've revealed to you. So, can't talk. Sorry. Right, okay, that makes no sense, but for a bank to potentially have $100,000 sign up to be handed to them to keep safe, you aren't selling us on the idea of handing that money over to you, because you sound like you want to lose us money. Yes, I agree, it feels like you're running off good money because you're afraid you won't land the account. Well said, yes, I agree with my friend here. The only thing that might change our opinions, I think, is seeing how safe this place actually is. I mean, we can potentially look past your failure as a salesman if we know that this place is safe. Henry leaned back in his chair after having stared off at the cubicle wall for a second, then with a mighty heave got himself off of his chair. I guess I could show you around then, no harm in that, is there? But you will invest the money, because we are the premier bank of the area, so to speak. So, follow me. Catalina nodded and tried to get up, But Leonardo had also tried to stand up, and the two tangled as they tried to get their legs in a spot where they could stand up from. But in a small office, and with small chairs, the two kept bumping into one another. First, Catalina slipped back into her chair, followed by Leonardo, who was almost fully able to stand up, but he was pretty sure that Catalina had kicked out his ankle and forced him back down. A few more times of up and down, one of which may have been him kicking out her foot just to make sure that they were both on even grounds and stumbling about, as the two stumbled about, mostly all over one another. Henry had already left the cubicle and was waiting for them, staring at them, out at the exterior. The banker looked over at them sourly as they continued to collect themselves up and straighten themselves out as they got out of this little cubicle space. A headshake of disapproval was ignored by Leonardo, who was pretending that everything between him and Catalina was okay.
"If you two are ready to go?"
"Yes, we are ready."
"Very good. This, as you can see, is our advice area for financial stuff. We do a lot of transactions up here, more than the first floor does in any day of the week. We're the big boys of the bank, bringing in all the money so it can't escape. Follow me to see more."
The trip across the sea of wooden cubicles took them a few minutes and led them back towards the elevator. Henry sprouted off a few more things, but they were so bland that they went right in one ear, through their minds, and then out the other, without bothering to stop for a second. However, they were not led back to the elevators which had brought them up. Henry went off to the side, where a few dark jet black elevators stood off to the side. How they'd missed them, other than they were really set off in the corner and looked unassuming, was beyond either Catalina or Leonardo, and the two sort of looked at each other and then the elevators that were to take them downward. Henry came to a stop, fetching out a key from his pocket and stuck it into the wall where the call elevator button should be. With a twist, the doors to one of them suddenly opened, and they were greeted and rushed into an empty elevator. Once aboard, the ride was a sudden one, dropping them very quickly and very suddenly downward. The lurch to a stop hit them as hard as it felt like they were jerked back up a few feet before this elevator settled down, and the doors then opened again. Catalina and Leonardo hurried out, since they didn't want to go through that again. Here, in this room, they were greeted by what seemed to be this bank's standard operating procedure, with a lobby area which had rugs and ropes leading up to a desk. But down here, the cold, cool area was a bit different from the usual. But they still were not allowed to stray even a millimeter away from the designated areas of this bank, and Henry took the lead once more as they strolled up to the desk with a wave of his hand.
"Showing people around, Mabel. No need for questions this time around."
They walked through this cold, cemented area, and with the banker leading the way, waltzing past this desk, and they were trying not to look at Mabel, who stared deeply at them. She, however, said nothing, which made Leonardo uncomfortable from all of the creepiness of no one talking to one another. Behind the desk stood a rather large and cumbersome-looking metal vault door in the back of this basement. Henry led them straight up to where the mouth of this thing was, allowing them to see the metal gridded wall behind the door that was there for extra protection. It didn't look like it added much, but extra security was extra security to get through. He glanced over at Catalina, who admired the vault, but didn't seem the least bit troubled by the fact that this vault had so much security going on with it. The rows and column of security boxes beyond, which they could just see, looked like they would be hell to get at them if you didn't know which or where your particular box was. Henry stepped in front of them and swept his arms out dramatically, as if to make a scene. It worked, since they were the only people there aside from Mabel, and as Leonardo snuck a look back, she too was paying attention.
"This is our vault, of course. We offer standard storage of items here. It has a best-in-the-business lockdown system that no one can get past. No way in or out of it once the door is slammed shut.
Very impressive, sir, Mr. Henry. Your bank loves to show off what it's got, doesn't it?
Yes. My partners and I love to show what we have, and to make sure that all the people who put money with us know it's being well taken care of and making money for the bank. Plus, who doesn't love looking at fancy things?
So is that the tour that we're getting? The first and the second floor and then this basement?
Yes. It doesn't seem like much compared to some of the super big city fancy banks, but it's all much nicer in here than anywhere else. And we know you by name, Mr. and, Mrs. Or Mrs. and, Mr. something.
Great, grand. Well, if you'll give us your business card and then show us how to get out of here, please, we will very, very strongly consider your bank. In a flash, a business card was placed carefully into Catalina's hand, and she gave him one back. He nodded appreciatively, and then brought them back to the elevator. His key pass was soon getting the doors open and sending them upward. They were dropped off at the bank lobby, with Henry Douglas not even offering a goodbye as they stepped off of it. Catalina grabbed a hold of Leonardo's arm and pulled him across the carpeted floor towards the exit. She seemed impatient about getting out of here as he took in the last sights and sounds. His mind was busy trying to figure out how to get in here and steal money. It didn't seem like it was a plausible thing to do, and she and her gang must have some grand solution. He wondered what it was going to be, or if they were going to tell him what it was. A pit of fear began forming in his mind that she wasn't going to keep her end of the deal up. So, are you interested in that vault? Interested? Well, maybe. They arrived at the doors and both hushed themselves, just in case it sounded weird saying stuff about the bank vault. They came out into the late afternoon with a hot and heavy sun beating on anyone who dared step outside. Leonardo felt like he'd also been hit by something and was about to melt from this heat, and his attention wandered, and to his surprise and fear, his eyes locked onto the two detectives that he had seen the other day and were now coming down the sidewalk, and they'd seen him. Oh crap, cops! Catalina was gone in a second, the barest of traces of touches reminding him that she'd just been holding his arm. He stumbled his way down the stairs and found himself directly in the path of said cops. A hand reached out and stopped his forward momentum, and he automatically knew it was one of the detectives. Leonardo collected his thoughts, and then began looking up at the two, who both looked like they had something to say.
Afternoon, gentlemen.
Yes, afternoon. I thought you stayed away from town, locked up in your little mansion, away from the world, Mr. Leonardo.
Yes, that is what he told us, Orion.
I also said I was trying to get out more and not to be so closed in.
So you did, but wouldn't you need someone with you to do that, so as not to get overwhelmed, Mr. Leonardo? I thought I did see him with someone, but it looked like a spooked cat. They were gone the second they came out of that bank.
My friend does not like cops. She had a bad experience once, I think, and she spotted the two of you, and she could instantly tell you were police officers, and so she ran off.
Anyway, don't you have better things to do, like questioning butlers? Oh, a sensitive one we have here today, Orion.
Detective Orion had reached into his pocket, pulling out a recorder and a notepad, then walked to one side of Leonardo, cutting off his direction towards the bank.
Yes, I think we do have a lot of questions, don't we, Hank? But nothing about butlers right now. No, we have found some information about a house. The one that you happen to claim is your home. Yes, sirree. It belongs to a foundation, not a family. A well-run trust and fund foundation of happiness. Do you happen to know anything about this, mister?
I thought my parents owned it. I know nothing about who actually owns it. You'd have to ask my butler. He probably knows more than I do. My parents turned it over to me with the express intent that I should stay and live there, and that's, I think, what they said. Yeah. The other detective, Hank, had his notepad out now and circled towards Leonardo's other side. He now had a cop on his left and his right, and he was now furiously looking between the two of them, trying to keep up with what was going on.
Stay there how, sir?
I live there, I guess, is the best way they wanted me to have it. Why are you asking me questions? What do I or my house have to do with finding out about some person running around as a butler?
We are just purely following along lines of inquiry, chasing down details of all things that come to our attention, and look potentially off. We are detectives, after all. As my partner Hank has pointed out, we're here to chase down information, and, by the way, we did not catch your full name, Mr. Leonardo, and your house is under a foundation name, and any mail that goes to your house is under the same foundation as just something doesn't add up there.
My name is Leonardo Damien. He glowered at them. But detectives, I still don't see what this has to do with me. Clouds had begun to darken and surround the area, causing them all to look up. No rain had fallen yet, but it was only a matter of time, it looked like.
You might not see anything at all, boy, but we see plenty. Like how you are so comfortable, all on your own out here. It does not add up for a person who claims to not be used to the world. Yes, as my partner points out, cops don't like liars, Mr. Leonardo.
I said I wasn't used to the world, but I'm working on it, and I'm working on bettering myself. I don't mind being out here even though it is odd. I've read my fair share of books about how life might be, but this is rather... Leonardo signaled all around them, where only a few smatterings of people were here and there. There aren't many people here to get worked up over, and it's not uncomfortable. It might be different and slightly uncomfortable if I was in a big city, but I'm not. So, gentlemen, it's troubling me, but I can handle it. The first drops of rain had begun to fall, and neither cop looked disturbed by this, which disappointed Leonardo. He wanted them to go away, and now he kind of hoped that the rain would do it.
As for the last name bit, you said it was Damien, correct?
Leonardo, puzzled by this, furrowed his brow, but nodded yes. What are the cops up to now?
What my partner Hank was trying to get at is if your parents are Charles and Rachel Damien. They work at the works of Bent Forges.
Leonardo continued, nodding yes. Those were certainly his parents' names, though he couldn't say if they actually worked at that place. They never talked about their work as far as he could remember, or running a business. The notebooks of the two detectives snapped shut, and were quickly stuffed away along with the recorder.
That does change quite a bit, wouldn't you say, Orion? Yes, it does. I don't need to step into that hornet's nest of a situation. So I will say this, boy. We think something is funny about you, but don't let us catch you doing anything whatsoever.
Leonardo had continued, shaking his head yes, unsure of what else to do. His nod was then returned by Orion, and then by Hank, who both quickly sauntered off. All Leonardo could do was stand there, questioning everything he knew. Once they were truly gone off and down the road, though, he turned to look for Catalina. She appeared to be long gone, from what he could see, and he didn't really feel like rushing back to find her, or to go find her. And his attention was suddenly drawn towards the town library, which wasn't far away. Maybe, just maybe, he should take a moment for himself, discover something or anything. He was free of Jeeves' control, after all, and maybe he could research his parents? Maybe check out this weird business that his parents might have owned, or that was something that sounded right. The works of... what was it again? It sounded like a stupid name, and I can't remember it. With a hurried gait, he headed for the library. The interior of this place, this library, was cozy, wooden, and very, very quiet. He felt like if he opened his mouth to make the slightest bit of noise, or even stepped the wrong way on some wooden floor and caused a massive squeak, he would instantly be thrown out. Leonardo kept looking all over the place for a computer or something that might give him an answer as to his parents. "Do you need help, sir?" The crisp voice broke through his thoughts and sent Leonardo reeling, not literally, but in his mind, towards the far wall of the front desk area. This desk sat to his left, and he turned to curiously look at it. How he had noticed it he wasn't sure, but there behind it sat a relaxed-looking woman who somehow looked nothing like a librarian should. No weird cat-eyed glasses or tight clothes, though he wondered why that would be called a librarian's uniform, or if librarians should be older people, or if maybe that was just the comic books he read. His mind could not make up its mind about the matter, or if he should be relieved that the image of a librarian was contrary to the fiction and completely wrong from what he thought. "I asked if you need help, sir. Do you need any help?" Yes, sorry. My first time in here, and I sort of got lost in thought and the quietness, and, 'cause it's a library." She nodded and stood up, holding her hand for something. Leonardo looked at her hand and then at her, questioningly. "Since you do not have a library card with us, you will need one to use any of our services. If you have an ID, I can set you up with an account, no problem." ID? Like a driver's license? Leonardo panicked as he reached for his wallet. He did not have a driver's license and wasn't even sure he had an ID of some sort, which would be of use in proving who he said he was. His mostly empty wallet was soon in his hands, and he was thumbing through it for any hopes of anything. A white laminated card stood out of the little card slot areas. He carefully pushed it outward to see that it had his picture on it, but most definitely not his name. It read Jacob Boxer, the name Catalina had thrown around in the bank, and he slid the card back into its spot. Apologies, I don't seem to have my ID with me for some reason today." She raised her eyebrow and sat back down a bit disappointed. "Well, why did you come here, mister?" Leonardo Damien is my name, and I came to use the computer to look up something that was bothering me." "You could not do that on your phone?" He shook his head no. I don't have a smartphone, and I'm waiting for my friend to reappear after she disappeared on me. She was my ride into and out of town, and, she just... "I see. Well, I suppose I can help you a little bit, since no one else is around." She stood up once again and came around the front desk, signaling for him to follow her with her pointer finger. She brought him to a quiet room where it was quite cold, and it had several computers humming away unused. Once inside, this librarian made sure that the door was shut tightly before heading over towards one and sitting down. "Now, Mr. Damien, what are we looking for?" Well, it sounds a bit strange, but I've been a bit estranged from my parents, and I was hoping to find out more about where they worked and, stuff about them. Something to do with the works, and my last name is Damien. I didn't really catch all of what I needed to know." She nodded and woke up the computer, deftly getting it working and on what she needed. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, typing at a speed that Leonardo had trouble keeping up with. He stood there, silently, swaying a bit from foot to foot, unsure if he should sit or stay standing. It seemed like standing was the right choice, but was it? She looked over at him after a few seconds and pointed towards a nearby chair. He moved over and sat down, keeping to himself, mostly. "May I ask what has brought this on? You of course don't have to answer. I'm just unusually nosy, since I am a librarian and I like to learn about things, especially history, since books mostly always seem to be historical in nature." "Oh, it's a bit kind of hard to explain. but I think they're sort of coming back into my life, and I just don't want to be caught off guard by them, and, I just need to find out about them. She nodded and went back to doing her search. The clicking of the keyboard brought about a calm quietness to the area, which gave him a little room to relax. For some reason, between Catalina and now Miss Charlotte, he couldn't seem to relax. Does the works of Bent Forges sound correct? Owned by the Damien family? Leonardo had been staring off into the distance, and snapped to when he realized that she'd asked him a question. His mind had been busy wandering between how to get comfortable around certain people and how to stop a fake bank robbery. Or was it a real bank robbery? Real fake bank robbery. Yes, that sounds about right. Are you all right? You seem to be very on edge about all of this, sir. I don't want this to cause problems for you. I could not live with myself if someone I helped had, it caused problems and something bad happened to them. Bad? No. I think it's fine. Just, I have a lot on my mind. I do need to prepare myself just in case my parents do show up. She looked at him doubtfully, but gave a little sigh and then turned back to the computer. Well, it says that the Ironworks Company is one of the richest and best run in this area. It's owned by the Damien family with a husband and wife who love each other very much. And because they've been so successful, they also own a variety of other businesses, which they turned into the works of Bent Forges. Oh, well, that sounds pretty standard. Nothing to get sad about, nothing to worry about. Yes, but their website does not mention a son. It seems odd to cut you out if you. Oh, it's fine. I'm not worried about that. I just want to learn what I can. What else you got? She clicked off the page she was on and onto another web page tab. It seemed to be a news source of some sort. The works of Bent Forges is in dire financial ruin. The family Damien is nowhere to be seen and has feared that they've gotten into some bad business with the local gang leaders. That caught his attention as he pushed his chair a little closer to read the screen. As she said, the words were on the computer, but what? He felt like there were many, many questions, and none wanted to come to the surface of his mind. Charlotte looked over at him. Do you want to continue alone? This seems like it might be something personal for you, and I don't want to interfere. No, you're fine. I mean, now I'll probably never meet them, and they are just a fleeting part of my life, so, it's just history, and you're interested in history, right? Well, I don't know. It does seem, not really connected to me. Is there anything else on them? She clicked over to another tab and soon had a new news story up. He could read the title for himself now. Damien husband and wife missing, disappearing during a storm of allegations. This story claims that they disappeared while investigations were ongoing and that the police had a heavy surveillance on the couple. They disappeared one night from a hotel in town. A further investigation is ongoing. When was this? 3 years ago, according to the newspaper article. Huh. Well, I guess someone is playing a prank on me then, saying that my family is coming back. Oh, weird. That sounds rather cruel. A bit, yes, but, can't really get upset when I should have been looking into my family much sooner, I guess. And I should probably get going. Thank you for your help, Miss Charlotte. He quickly got up and offered his hand to shake, which she took, surprised, and he sort of shook limply, making a note to himself that he should learn how to do handshakes, since that one felt all wrong, and then was out of the room. He stepped out of the library a few minutes later, the sky having cleared of rain, and was once again brighter. Leonardo glanced around to see if Catalina had appeared or was around. She did not pop out, and he looked further around to orient himself. The car was parked behind the bank that he had come in on, and the parking lot was somewhere over there. He pointed off in front of him and then set out for there, hoping that across the street was right. A brisk walk took him to the other side of the road, and he soon found the parking lot he was looking for. Now, his only problem was finding the car that he'd come in on. Thankfully, and a bit to his surprise, he saw Catalina pop out of the car and then wave him over. After a second to process this and comprehend what he'd just seen, since she'd vanished back into the car a second later, he went that way. He would slide into the passenger seat and close the door, getting comfortable before turning to Catalina, who was busy with the sun visor mirror, looking over herself. "What happened to you?" Talked to the cops, then got sidetracked learning some stuff. "About?" "My parents." She looked over at him, concerned by the mention of his family. Her face seemed to dark, but he wasn't entirely sure if that was happening or if maybe it was the shade in the complexion from the sun visor. "Well, what about you? You ran off in a flash." "We still needed a person at the bank, so I went and found someone to help us. That's now done, and I've been waiting around for you to appear. Shall we go?" It is getting late, and I think I need to talk to Jeeves." "About?" He shrugged and declined to answer, which earned him a hard stare. She sighed when she realized he wasn't talking, and got the car going. Leonardo wondered why she wanted to know about his family, but settled in for the ride. He could keep secrets too, since she hadn't been exactly forthcoming either about what she was getting up to. Getting a bank employee and then not saying anything else? Highly odd. The drive back to the house came and went with Catalina driving in her usual fashion of not terribly safely. It got the job done, but he did wonder how she hadn't been pulled over by some cops. And that hadn't happened, and they pulled into the driveway to his home and began the trek up to the garage. When they reached the garage door, Jeeves was there and opened it up for Catalina. But Leonardo got out of the car and waited for the garage door to be closed before turning to his butler. "Jeeves?"
"Yes, sir. Is there something I can do to help you, or I can help you with?"
"Yeah, many things, since you seem to be a seer of all things and know all things to be seen."
"I do try my hardest, sir."
"Excellent. Then shall we actually talk about my parents for once?" Jeeves froze up for a second, then nodded his head yes and signaled that they should go into the house.
"I will explain what I can, sir."
A few minutes later, they were both in the living room with Leonardo taking a seat on the sofa. He wanted to get comfortable, but no matter what he did, it felt like something was off. It, perhaps, did not help that Jeeves was now pacing about the room with his forefinger to his lips, looking very off, although quite studious and serious, which wasn't unusual, but it did feel very, very different.
"Is it troubling for you to tell me about my parents, Jeeves?" "It is, sir, it is."
"Well, I already know they own the works of Bent Forges, and they've gone missing, reportedly, due to a mob or gang ties or something like that."
"Where did you learn that, sir?"
"The library, where I can freely search the internet for stories and information, and simply know things."
"I see. Well, that is partially true, and partially not true that your parents owned the works."
"And that they vanished. You said a few days ago that you went and met with them. How could you do that if they've vanished?" The pacing stopped, and the finger came away from Jeeves' lips.
"Your parents decided to disappear because they are superheroes, and they did not want you to get involved in a situation that went badly."
End of part 4. Thank you for listening.